But here we are once again, gentlemen, with a different idea of regulation and capitalism. There's a different chemistry in Europe than there is in the United Kingdom, Adrian, as there is in the United States. It's obviously anti-capitalist, but is it anti-innovation and disruption as well?
I think one thing we're getting is a lot of pressure for regulation, the idea that business must be doing something bad and we need to regulate it. And I'm worried about that because quite often the very people who are putting the pressure for regulation are also the people who begin to complain that we're not creating enough jobs, that we haven't got enough innovation. There is a trade-off, and I worry that the trade-off is done too much in favour of tightening the rules.
John, I remember a paper a good 14 years ago now, Michael Mauboussin, on how there will be fewer winners within the Internet and within the digital space. Is it a normal reaction of any government or any regulatory body to react against a strong few, like Google, like Amazon and the rest?
There are two things going on. There's, as well as what Adrian said, people who don't like capitalism, there's also quite a lot of capitalists, because if you look at what's happened in Europe, some of the main people who've been targeting Google have been people like the German media companies who've been using their clout.
They're old technology people saying, what, get us in.
Because that's always the story of regulation. It helps some business people as it gets in the way of many. In this particular case, what you're talking about is the fact that the Internet has always had this problem. It pushes towards some degree of dominance because everybody apart from you uses iPhones. Well,
I was going to go to the iPhone part, Vonnie. The basic idea here is on this day of a new Apple launch, Apple's almost never mentioned within this government regulation. They've skirted the Microsoft, Google traumas.
To a certain extent, and, you know, so far, but we shall follow that story.
I think they will be just as worried. Everyone in this space, it's very easy for a government to look at technology. You have enormous market shares. Apple has an enormous market share within the smartest end of the phone industry, and that is something which I'm sure people will look at as well.
There's huge fear of market dominance, but on the other hand, a lot of this market dominance is very passing. I remember the time when Nokia came from nowhere. It suddenly dominates the mobile phone business. 3/4 of the world mobile phones are Nokia. Then Nokia is knocked off its preeminence. So these markets are very, very changeable.
Yeah, Francine?
Yeah, Adrian, you know, you talk a lot in your book, of course, about disruption and the fact that it comes from technology, comes from innovation manufacturing. How much is China disrupting the world? And how should we look at China to see how we cannot be disrupted or try and push back against this disruption?
Look, China's disrupting the world enormously. You know, you take a country that was about 3% of global GDP in 1980, it's coming up to 1/4 of global GDP now. That's a change of a sort that we haven't seen in the past in terms of rapidity. But secondly, we have a whole bunch of companies in China that have gone from nothing to being global players in themselves that are going to disrupt both markets at home but markets abroad that are becoming global powerhouses, Alibaba being a classic example, Huawei being another one. So, yes, it will disrupt the world, and even if the overall Chinese economy slows down and China goes into some sort of retreat, it's nevertheless now created a legion of global companies that will continue to be major disruptors.
Are we in danger of another Iceland? Companies or countries and states depending too much on one particular industry? You mentioned Israel being too dependent at the moment on tech.
I think Israel definitely is too dependent on tech, and what that means is you get a small group of people who are doing really well and doing lots of innovation, and the rest of the economy fairly sluggish. I think that Iceland is a huge problem. The thing that interests me here is Norway, which is a country hugely dependent on oil, massively skewed economy, but nevertheless it decided to insure itself against that dependence by creating a sovereign wealth fund. So now, even though the oil price is going down, they're sitting pretty happy because they've got this fund which will keep them going for generations.
Well, and a central bank.
Yeah, very good central bank, yes.
Adrian Wooldridge, thank you so much. The great disruption, how business is coping with turbulent times. And John, thank you so much as well. Editor-in-Chief of Bloomberg. Francine Lacroix, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Francine Lacroix from our London News Bureau this morning.